I'm Sumitra Visvanathan. I work to make Malaysia a better country for women and girls. There's so much that we can do, so much that we need to do as individuals, as a society, as a nation to make that a reality. But right now, in the situation in which we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic, I want to talk about ending domestic violence against women and children. In so doing, I want to also draw your attention to two very important issues. And one is social justice and the other, public health. Social justice is about fairness. It's about equality. It's about ensuring that everyone in our community, every individual in this community, Malaysia, is able to have equal opportunity and equal access to those opportunities in the area of economic rights, social rights, political rights, and cultural rights. That's social justice. And then let's talk about public health as a concept. What is public health? It's really about promoting, protecting, preserving the health of individuals and the health of communities in everyday life, in everything that we need to do. We live, we learn, we play, we work, and ensuring that we are indeed able to preserve and protect and enjoy good health in all of that we do. So domestic violence. So why is domestic violence so important right now? In 2014, University Science Malaysia had a study, and in that study they had found that 1 in 10 women in Peninsular Malaysia have previously or are currently in situations of domestic violence. What does that mean? If you have a group of 10 women, you take one woman out of that group and she is either living in domestic violence right now or is dealing with the after effects of having lived in a situation of violence. Now that is endemic. That qualifies as endemic in my view, and I'm sure you'll agree too. Domestic violence is a crime in Malaysia, yet it occurs. Then we have COVID pandemic. As of March 2020, we have been in various lockdowns at various times in various shapes and forms. The one thing that has been consistent, however, is that we have all been confined to our own homes. 1 out of every 10 women in Malaysia who is confined within her own home is living in a situation of domestic violence in her own home. Home is meant to be that one place where we should be safe, where we should be supported, and where we should be happy. But when there is domestic violence, it is that one place where the woman is most at risk to her life, to her limb, to her liberty. And not just the woman, but also her children. Because frequently, abuse also extends to the kids. So you have that situation where everyone is, closeted together and the perpetrator is together with the survivors in the same space for long periods of time. What happens then? There is aggravation. It happens more frequently. And sometimes the wider environment is such that it seeks to bring out and make more aggressive whatever issues that are already present in that relationship or in that family. So as of March 2020, a local women's human rights organization, Women's Aid organization, had recorded an increase of 275% in calls to their emergency crisis hotlines. That's a huge increase. And in the first 6 months of 2021 alone, they dealt with almost 1,800 cases. In 1 week, rescuing 12 women and children from abusive households. Now that is absolutely staggering if you think about the number of women and children who right now are in situations of risk. It's serious. WHO has actually called the rise of domestic violence worldwide, because yes, it is a global pandemic, the pandemic within the pandemic. It's the hidden pandemic. It's the hidden crisis within COVID-19 pandemic. We want to control the virus, yes, but we should also be doing more to address and to alleviate the situation of domestic violence right now, which actually has become more pronounced, more difficult, more dangerous for women and children in Malaysia. 1 out of every 10. What can we do? So I want to propose a public health approach that is grassroots based. So women in situations of domestic violence, more than any other place, more than women's rights NGOs, more than religious leaders, more than the police, women go to their doctors, they go to hospitals, they go to health centers. That is the place that they are most likely to go to seek help if they are living in situations of violence. And it makes sense, right? Because domestic violence has that critically dangerous impact, not just on her physicality, but also on her mental health. So women go to their healthcare providers. And there was another study done in amongst 882 women in Kuala Lumpur. And out of those women surveyed, it was found that 22% had experienced domestic violence. However, when the survey turned to the actual healthcare providers, almost 92% of healthcare providers did not specifically ask a woman about her experience of domestic violence. But 2/3 of those women surveyed had stated that if they were indeed asked about the experience of violence, they would have disclosed it to their healthcare providers. So there are so many barriers to healthcare providers actually asking women about what they feel, what have they experienced, why are they experiencing certain symptoms. And those barriers are really so easy to surmount, because those barriers are things like, being shy to ask such questions because the question is seen as too personal or too invasive, not sure how to sensitively ask that question, and most tellingly and most critically, not realizing how important it is to actually ask that question. So those are the barriers. Now, these kinds of barriers are actually so easily overcome because, for instance, WHO has wonderful training curriculum for healthcare providers to train them so that they can actually build their own capacity to understand why domestic violence is an issue, what a healthcare provider can do, the critical role that the healthcare provider plays in addressing domestic violence, and how to ask sensitively. So women present a lot of issues, health-related issues, to their healthcare providers, which emanate and stem from their experience of domestic violence. And this most specifically can be not just from the obvious broken bones, etc., but if there is a physical injury, it's always worthwhile to ask that question. How did you get that injury? Okay, so you have a black eye. What led to that? You fell in the bathroom? What did you hit against? And then to see where the red flags are, what are the warning signs, and then ask sensitively, probe a little further. Then you have those other effects, those psychosocial effects, things like can't sleep at night, I just can't rest, I feel so depressed, I just have no hope for the future. Those kinds of psychosocial symptoms, ask sensitively. It makes sense to ask, why are you unable to sleep, for instance? And then also the other thing is the sexual and reproductive aspect. A lot of women who are survivors of domestic violence will manifest symptoms like pelvic pain, unexplained pelvic pain. And that usually is rooted in an experience of violence in the home. So healthcare providers need to be trained. They need to be capacitated to know where those red flags are. What are the red flags? What can I do? How do I probe sensitively? And then if I do indeed believe that there is a situation of domestic violence and the woman discloses it to me as a healthcare provider, who do I refer to? What can I do? What do I need to do in order to ensure her safety? So training is important for all healthcare providers. And number two is, let's bring it down to the grassroots. In Malaysia, we have a wonderful network of klinik kesehatans, health clinics throughout the country, everywhere. This is where women go. Women go to clinics. Women go to their GPs as well in the private sector. This is where they go. So we need to capacitate klinik kesehatans. We need to capacitate GPs to be able to understand that this is an issue, to be able to understand how to address it within their own particular contexts and capacities. It is so critical. We need to have that network. It's about bringing it down to the grassroots. It's about enabling and empowering people at grassroots, healthcare providers at grassroots, to recognize that it's a problem, to be able to respond within the capacities that they have currently, and where else to refer. Training. Training is important. Networking is important. And when we network, when we bring together all of the klinik kesehatans in that network, it's not just about nurses and doctors and medical officers and so forth. It's not just having them trained and capacitated. It's also about building networks, and we need to see that multi-stakeholder network. So the healthcare provider is connected and knows and understands the local police station, the local D11 if there is one, the local OSCC in case specialized health services are needed for that woman, the welfare setup in that locality, the shelter setup in that locality. So I identify as a healthcare provider that this woman is in a situation of domestic violence, and I know what I need to do next to ensure she gets the safety, the protection, and the justice that she requires in order to overcome that violence in that first crisis instance. That is so important. We need to have investment. Yes, right now, COVID is a priority. The pandemic is a priority. But you know what? We are in the middle of getting to grips with it. But we're not doing enough to address violence against women and not doing enough to address domestic violence, which we know is such a hugely devastating impact, one of the most critical impacts of this pandemic. We need to do more to address it. So we need to have investment in women's shelters, not just NGO shelters, but also government shelters. We need to see investment in training people at the grassroots level, including klinik kesehatan. And I keep going to klinik kesehatan because it's about access. It's about facilitating quick and easy access to healthcare when it's most required by women who are in domestic violence. It's about investing in training. It's about investing in networks, not just building networks, but maintaining networks. So it's really about bringing together everyone who has a role, the community leader, the Rukun Tetangga, the local residents association, the local police station, the local health clinic, bringing everyone together so that we are knowledgeable, we are capacitated, we understand that it's a problem, we know what the red flags are, and when we do identify indeed that there is a situation of domestic violence, that we are able to respond. So let's talk about moving forward. What do we need to do moving forward? So number one is we need to ensure that enforcement is stronger, is better, is more targeted, and it's more sensitized to the experience of the survivor. Because remember, survivors of domestic violence live within families. They have children. And they need to be able to not just be safe and protected, but they also need to ensure that they are able to maintain themselves economically, that they are able to maintain their children if they need to, that they are able to move forward into the future to live a life free of violence. That is so critical. We need to make sure that we are putting enough investment in raising public awareness on ending domestic violence, in training local actors so that they know what needs to be done in order to assess, in order to address, in order to respond to domestic violence. And we need to put that investment into the infrastructure that needs to be in place and present so that women survivors of domestic violence and their children are able to seek the support that they need as and when it is most needed. It is so critical. I want to talk again about making Malaysia a better country for women and girls. We need to do this. Why? Because it's not just for the benefit of women and girls, it's for the benefit of all of us in Malaysia. Everyone in Malaysia stands to gain when there is gender equality, when women are safe, when we end violence against women. Thank you very much.